All right. So here then is our scripture. And when Boaz had eaten and drunk, and his heart was merry, he went to lie down at the end of a heap of corn. That sound familiar to y'all? Nothing says a romantic night like that. By the way, this is our Valentine's sermon. She came softly and uncovered his feet and laid her down. And it came to pass at midnight that the man was afraid and turned himself. And behold, a woman lay at his feet. He said, Who art thou? And she answered, I am Ruth, thine handmaid. Spread therefore thy skirt over thy handmaid, for thou art a near kinsman. And he said, Blessed be thou of the Lord, my daughter, for thou hast showed more kindness in the latter end than at the beginning, insomuch as thou followest not young men, whether poor or rich. And now, my daughter, fear not, I will do to thee all that thou request, for all the city of my people doth know that thou art a virtuous woman. So we go back here and we look at this. Boaz has eaten and drank, he's finished his meal, and his heart is merry, and he goes and he lies down at the end of a heap of corn. Matter of fact, he lies down on the threshing floor because all the grain is piled up there. Why do you think he'd go there and spend the night and sleep? Well, he'd work, all his work was done, he had his meal, he goes back out and sleeps on the threshing floor. Bandits would come by with sacks and would steal the grain. And so he's out there keeping a good watch. This girl crawls up in there. It says that he was afraid, and he said, Who dat, right? And here it is Ruth. Now the Bible says here that, by the way, it was at midnight. My friend's dad, when we were in high school, he'd always say, boys, nothing good happens after midnight, okay? So here she is, it's past midnight, and behold, a woman lay at his feet. He says, Who's that? She answered, I'm Ruth, thy handmaid. Now look at this. Spread therefore thy skirt over thy handmaid. So she uncovers his feet, and then she says, Spread your skirt over me. What in the world is going on here? Sounds awful scandalous, doesn't it? So is this how they court down in southern West Virginia, Laura? I'm not sure, but well, we'll look here a little bit. I want to see Ruth examined. Voltaire, the great atheist. Well, that's probably not the best adjective for him. Voltaire dwelt with enthusiasm on the marvelous sweetness and simplicity of this gem in Oriental history. And then Headley, in his commentary, says this, and this is the only two quotes I got here. Fiction has never written so truthful and beautiful a tale. One, while it reaches and subdues the heart, leaves no stain that would soil an angel's purity. Like all God's works and manifestation, it is faultless. No novelist has ever been able, with his utmost efforts, to paint so lovely, so perfect a character as this simple story presents. From first to last, Ruth appears before us endowed with every virtue and charm that render a woman attractive. And we read that, and every ladies' day, of course, goes through Ruth, and we look at this lady, and she's such a virtuous lady. But then you read this circumstance where she crawls in on the threshing floor after midnight, uncovers his feet, and says, Spread your skirt over me. And we wonder, what in the world is going on? And it's a good question. Now, I want to look at a couple things. By the way, I need to look at the time. Speak unto the children of Israel, and bid them that they make fringes in the borders of their garments throughout their generation, and that they put upon the fringe of the borders a ribbon of blue. Now, here, I want you to look at this. I'm going to try to explain, first of all, the uncovering of the feet, and then the spreading of the skirt, okay? We're going to get to the bottom of this scandal tonight. And I know it's Super Bowl night, so I got to go quickly. The Lord's... Don't even worry about the Super Bowl. I'm glad. You know what? I'm not worried about the Super Bowl because I don't care much about either one of those teams. Yeah. But I would like the Eagles to win because I'm rooting for the underdog. The Lord spake unto Moses, saying, Speak unto the children of Israel, and bid them that they make them fringes in the border of their garments throughout their generations. And they put upon the fringe of the borders a ribbon of blue. And it shall be unto you a fringe, that ye may look upon it, and remember all the commandments of the Lord, and do them. And that ye seek not after your own heart and your own eyes, after which ye used to go a-whoring, that ye may remember and do all my commandments, and be holy unto your God. I am the Lord your God, which brought you out of the land of Egypt, to be your God. I am the Lord your God. So, here then, I'm bringing up these fringes. Every male, every Jewish male was commanded to put fringes at the end of his talit, or his shawl that he would wear. Now, I'll tell you what, Laura and I started this conversation almost a year ago, and I've been going through the Hebrew, which is not the easiest, and working my way through this, and the words that are used is for this right here. So Boaz, he has one of these on, and when he gets on the threshing floor, he just covers up with it, and it covers down through his whole body, along with whatever clothes he had. Each of the four corners of the garment, the talit, the prayer shawl, had to have tzitzit, or a fringe on it. This was made very clear to the children of Israel. They were to look on fringes and remember. Okay? Now, what are they to remember? They're to remember their relationship with God, number one, and they're to remember the commandments. Okay? So, this is interesting. Somebody has done this. This is not my chart, but it's awful interesting. Tzitzit. That's how you pronounce that in Hebrew. So the tzitzit is not the shawl itself. It's these fringes that hang on it, okay? I grew up in the 70s and 80s, and women always wore those leather jackets. They had all those fringes that came down. Remember that? It's probably good that that style now is gone, but that was a big deal. Laura, you probably don't remember that. But these fringes were at the ends of the shawl or at the ends of their garment. They would tie them in. And these are called tzitzit. Each tzitzit consists of 7 white strands, representing the number of perfection. The tahelet, the blue thread, makes 8, the number of new beginnings. The numerical value of tzitzit is 600. Remember, you take the Hebrew alphabet, each letter has a value. So, this combined with the 8 strands and 5 knots makes a total of 613. Why is 613 important? There were 613 laws. You remember, this was made so that they could remember the commandments. There are 613 of them. Now, did you know when people wear tzitzit, they're literally donning the 613 commandments of the Torah. This, in effect, places spiritual armor over them. 248 organs of the body and 365 sinews, which adds up to 613. Now, that last part, I sort of chuckled at. I think maybe we're going too far. But this part, the rabbis recognized this millennia ago. Now, I want to move here. The term talit, or talith, is 2 Hebrew words, meaning tent and little. And so when the talit is wrapped around the shoulders and it's pulled up over the head, it forms the owner a little tent, okay? Or a prayer closet. Now, I know that I've pointed this out to you before, but the prayer closet where he meets with God privately. The psalmist wrote, I will dwell in your tent for all ages. I will take refuge in the shelters of the corners of your, and the words that are used here is of your talit. And so there's a lot of power in this. When Jesus in the Sermon on the Mount told them to pray, how did he tell them to pray? In their closet. Now, if you've been as confused as I have never in my house went to my closet and shut the door and prayed. Matter of fact, it's full of guitar cases and everything. I couldn't get in there anyway. But what he was talking about was this idea of the covering or the little tent, okay? Am I going good here? All right. The tzitzit had to have a cord of blue in it, according to the command of God. So that's not a very good picture, but you can see it. I want to move on as quick as I can. The tahelet, this idea of the blue dye, is mentioned 49 times in the Hebrew Bible, and I read every time that it was mentioned. It's used in the clothing of the high priest, and the tapestries of the tabernacle, and the tassels. And so here then you could see that beautiful blue there on the high priest. Here on the tassels, this is an artist's depiction of what we think the screens in the tabernacle look like. And then, of course, you have the veil. You remember this would be the veil that Jesus talked about being rent. All right. Now, this is where it gets interesting. And again, I know that I've talked a little bit about this, but there was a mystery A 1,300-year-old mystery. Okay? This blue, you see this is black and white. Some of you were alive when this is all they had. You know, the colors of Israel now on their flag is blue and white. But it was black and white for the longest time. That's why you see a lot of these Orthodox Jews, all they wear is black and white. It's because they had lost this color, tehelet. Okay? Gone. Just gone. And so for 1,300 years, people were trying to figure out how to make it. They didn't know how to make it. They could make the color purple. They would use a snail, and they would work it together. By the way, I told Laura, anyone who was a dyer, if your job was to dye, make dyes, make clothing, and dye clothing, do you think of anybody, by the way, in the Bible that was a dyer? Lydia. Lydia was probably a very stinky person. Okay? And it does not surprise me, by the way, that you don't hear about a husband. Here's why. If you go in there and get the Talmud out, you're going to find out that the rabbis during the time of Christ said that it was okay to divorce your spouse if they were a dyer. You'd get a bill of divorcement. Why? Because they sunk to high heaven. That gives you a different picture of Lydia, doesn't it? But here then, they knew how to make the color purple, but they had lost the blue for 1,300 years. The blue has a lot of symbolism. The rich blue colors were called the oceans and the sea. The sea is like the sky, and of course you're to remember heaven, God's throne. Now, in the Old Testament, the tallit of a prophet or a master teacher would have dark purple blue threads in the corner. This is why the woman with the issue of blood touched the hem of his garment. What is she touching? His tzitzit or his tallit, all right? Now, they believed that it had special power. Ancient Jewish tradition tells us, and I think they're probably onto something here, because it seems like that woman with the issue of blood had heard this. He was around during the time of Christ. What did Elijah bestow on Elisha before he died? It's called his mantle. Now, that's the euphemism for tallit. And it became something, especially after Elisha and Elijah, it became something where power and anointment resided at the hem. Okay? Now, you remember when David crept into the cave, into Saul's cave, what did he cut off of Saul? What part? The corner, the hem. Okay? Now, the corner represents the borderland. And I want you to think about this. This is what separates, it's the closest thing to us and to the outside world. Also, if you follow the sky up, you could see blue all the way, and then all of a sudden, what happens? In the color palette, do you know the last color next to clear is blue? If you follow the sky, you'll see the sky go up, and then it becomes clear. That's the borderland. That's the heavens. And so this blue, when they looked at it, it was to remind them that God abides in heaven, and it was to remind them it was the color of the sea. Okay? I'll talk a little more about this because I'm running out of time here. According to the Talmud, or as Tommy calls it, the Taliban, the color was obtained and dye produced from a marine creature, a species of snail called the hilazon, or as they say in Israel, hilazon. Okay? Now, they knew a few things about it. They knew that it had arms coming out of its head. They knew that it swam at the bottom of the water. They knew that it carried a shell with it. They knew these certain things, but they had lost what this sea creature was. Okay? A rabbi in the 1850s, a real cowboy from Poland, had decided that it was, of all things, the cuttlefish. And so he started cutting up cuttlefish and adding indigo, and he got a blue. But when they did the chemical analysis, things didn't work out, all right? And so what they finally came to was, it was the Murex trunculus. Okay, do I have a picture of that? Oh, yes, I do. Right here. Here's the Murex trunculus. Don't think of, what are those ones you blow into and you can hear the sea? Is that the conch shell that we have on our beaches? Okay, so it's like this big. This is only about this big, okay? You can see a basket here of them. And then it actually is, let me do this. It's actually the size of a thimble, okay? Well, they put it together, and so the small animal's body contains a special gland. The liquid from that gland was dried and became a powder. The powder doesn't necessarily look that blue. By the way, where was this thing used? It was used in the tabernacle. You could see that there. I could probably skip through a lot of this, but see all that blue? Blue and purple and scarlet. These are important colors in the Bible. Here it is again, another look at it, and there are the verses that talk about the tehelet, or this blue. Here we go. Tehelet blue, known as divine blue, has come to symbolize the hope of redemption. With its loss and amazing rediscovery after nearly 2,000 years. Extracting blue and purple dyes from a snail that grew in the Mediterranean became an important industry. If you read Josephus and others, this was one of the biggest money makers in all of Israel, making these colors, okay? And again, after the Islamic invasion of the Holy Land in the 7th century, it disappeared for 14 centuries. The formula evaded the Jewish scholars. When the Romans conquered Israel in 63 BC, they seized the production of Tehelet blue. Rome came in, took over Israel, all right? And they took over this industry. They took over the glass industry. They took over the garum. You remember garum is that fishy sauce we talked about? They took over all these industries, okay? And Jewish dyers went underground, and they lost the process. But time came and things changed. There's that little fella, all right? So in 1984, a scientist, they could get the blue or the purple out of this snail. They kept getting it. And someone came up to him, as a matter of fact, I have his name here, Irving Zinderman, a biochemist. They said, Irving, you are stinking up the whole place. Get that stuff out of the laboratory. So he takes this bucket of blue dye out of the laboratory, and he sets it right outside on the table, and he goes back in. And he goes for a smoke break a half hour later, and when he gets out there, he looks down at the dye and he notices something. He pulls the wool up, and he wrings it out, and voila! 1,300-year-old mystery solved. All right? And he would have got away with it if it wasn't for those bending Romans, correct? So, this is where we finally see that the Tehelet is back. And now, when you look at the Israeli flag, and when you look at all of these people in these robes, of course, you see the Tehelet blue. It's made a comeback. What are you doing to those kids? All right. So, any questions so far? Well,
yeah.
Yes.
What's your name? Purple. She did the purple stuff. How'd she get those mysteries? She have to die for them?
Yes, you die for them. As a matter of fact, you cast out nets. Every 7 years, they come along the Mediterranean. Now, remember, Lydia isn't living in Israel. And so certain places they come, but they have kind of a migration. And the ocean will bring them around, and about every 7 years you get them. So you get this big pile of these things, and then you have to store them. So you'd store them. There would be a cooper who would put them in a barrel. Can you imagine snails for 7 years in the barrel? By the way, Y'all eat Worcestershire sauce? Okay, your Worcestershire sauce, there is an anchovy that is in a barrel for a few years, and it's rotting and fermenting. And then they take that, they put it in a jar, and that's what you use when you're making whatever it is that you make. Okay? This is a very ancient practice. These were the condiments of the ancient world. They ate that stuff. But in this case, they wouldn't eat these. They would use them for dyeing. All right. So I'm going to move on here a little bit and go as quick as I can. Do you see here? This is interesting. You see how it actually looks yellow? You actually have to wring it out before the blue comes out. It comes out of there looking like this. But the moment you start wringing it, you could just see the blue appear. It's really, really fascinating. And of course, there were different fabrics during that time. There was wool and there was linen, okay? There was fine. Do you know how linen is made? By the way, what's the difference between wool and linen? Anybody know? You can make linen. You're very, very close. It is, so wool is from an animal, but linen is from a plant, so you're very close. It's actually from flax, okay? And so, by the way, there's more flax grown in North Dakota than any other state in America. Yeah, go ahead. Yep. America used to use a lot of flax, okay? So if you want to find flax today, you go to North Dakota. You can grow it here. As a matter of fact, I saw a lady on the internet who grew flax just to make a linen blanket. And so if you want to go today, you go to North Dakota. It needs a colder climate. But Canada sells more flax than anybody in the world, right? And so they take these fabrics, and of course they would dye them. Let me move ahead here. Here is the only ancient Tehelet that we have. That's the only one that survived, okay? And I think that's very, very interesting. I want you to look at all these people here at the Wailing Wall, all these Jews who are praying. Look at all that. You see, you have this. You see the blue here, and the blue's coming back. And it's a real revival for the Jewish people. All right. Let me look at this, and then we'll quit. I think I've gone 15 minutes here, or 20. One of the most beautiful scenes in the book of Ruth, chapter 3 and verse 9, is the account provides a further illustration of covenant when Ruth pulled the prayer shawl, or the tallit of Boaz, over herself as she lay at his feet in the threshing floor. So what are we getting at here? Okay, the scandal is going to be solved tonight. Most translations say, and the King James says, pulled his skirt over her. Now that sounds very scandalous, doesn't it? And I often wonder, what's he doing wearing a skirt? But the Hebrew Bible says she pulled his wing over her. Okay? So if you weren't confused already, and you're reading Ruth, what do you do with this idea that he pulled his wing over? The wing refers to the long-established Hebrew tradition, referring to the way a male bird opens his wings during reproduction and courtship. Okay? Oh, it's getting more scandalous now, isn't it? And so the idea of opening his wings and drawing one in. Okay? Now, the bird opens its wings to bring its chicks in as family, right? This is the process I believe Jesus is referring to when he says, O Jerusalem, I would have been as a mother hen who gathers her chicks, but you would not. So, I wanted to show you something there. See, here he is spreading his wings. That's what that's called. Now, here, this is the Valentine part of it. Here then, does anybody know what this is? Have any of you ever been to a Jewish wedding? Okay, when you go, you pay attention there, Mariah? When you go to a Jewish wedding, they stand under this. Who knows what this is called? It's called the chuppah. All right? Now notice what it is. This one, it is not blue, but anymore they are more blue. See the Israeli flag there? So you stand under this. What does this represent? This is what the Bible calls the wings. And so the idea is when you spread your wings over someone, like this is how they do it. They take their Tehelet and they spread it over the one that will be their bride. Okay? Are you seeing this now? All right, let's see. It's interesting to note that a similar custom still prevails at Jewish weddings. The tradition evolved in the present day chuppah, literally canopy or cover. Here then, he is going to cover her with his wings. This is a prayer shawl held up by 4 poles and covers the bride and groom under the wings for their wedding ceremony, which is in fact of the blood covenant. This is a tent, again, okay, or a closet. You're seeing how this is all fitting together? I hope you are, because I'm trying to go as fast as I can for you. All right, when Ruth pulled the prayer shawl over her, she was in effect saying, Boaz, let's get married. All right? So I've been trying to tell my girls, there's nothing wrong with you asking the man to marry you. Okay? Let's get married. Why? She says, well, you're my nearest relative or kinsman. Now, I don't think that's what it is. As you read the book of Ruth, you find that there's a genuine love here. All right? But she's asking that he perform the custom of kinsman redeemer. Boaz did, as was customary, he spread his skirt or his wings over Ruth. Look at that. See that? Okay. And there was an immediate response. He was acknowledging his role and responsibility, indicating that he was by legal authority taking her under his protection as his wife. And we still use a phrase, taking them under your wings. Okay? All right. So the Hebrew term chanap means an edge or the extremity. Notice Ezekiel 16 and verse 8 says this, now when I passed by you, behold, your time was the time of love. I told you this was a Valentine sermon. And I spread my skirt over you and covered your nakedness. This is God, by the way. Okay? I spread my skirt over you and covered your nakedness. Yes, I swore unto you and entered into covenant with you, and you became mine. He's talking about a marriage here. And who's doing the talking? God is. Okay? And so God is pictured as spreading his wings. That word there is our word, tehelet. Yes, here this talks about all the other nations did this, but I'm going to bring this to a close here. Lord, you have my Bible. Jewish tradition indicate that the mantle that fell, well, from Elijah was a tallit. Okay, we've already talked about that. People believe that this thread contained miracle power. This is why the woman with the issue of blood wanted to touch the hem of Jesus' tallit or garment. When she was healed, Jesus said, who touched me? I felt virtue leave. Remember, they believed that all of their virtue and all of their anointing and all of their power resided in the tzitzit, the tassels. Then he told her, your faith has made you whole, clarifying it was not a purple thread or a blue thread, but her faith in him that made her whole and saved her. All right, so, you know, this is interesting to me. You notice what Boaz was calling her? You see it here? You guys read that? Daughter. That's curious. Let me see if I can make it big for you. Blessed be thou of the Lord. Oops. Blessed be thou of the Lord. Where'd I go? My daughter. Right there it is. Can you all see it? Where's daughter? Okay. And she uncovers the hem of his garment to ask him, could I be your bride? Could you protect me? Will you make me whole? If you were to go over to Mark chapter 5 and 6, and you read the story, by the way, of this woman here at the very end, this woman who crawled through the press. Do you remember what he called her, what Jesus called this woman? Daughter. Isn't that curious? What was he trying to draw the people's mind to? to this, yes, the family of God. And he came to Israel, Yahushua HaMashiach, the hope of Israel, to gather unto himself a bride. And that's his church. Now, this will be your invitation, and I'll quit there. I don't know how long I went. If I went a little long, I'm sorry. This is the invitation. Now, this thing looked like the sea, this color blue, all right? And the sky is blue, right? Now, if you take a cup, and this is not my illustration. This comes from modern-day rabbis. They have a wonderful illustration here. They're supposed to think of the vastness of God and his glory. This color blue reminds them of the sea, and it reminds them of the sky and how close we really are. But he says, when you see it, you're supposed to see God. When you look out across the sea, do you see God? When you look to the sky, are you like David, who said, the heavens declare the glory of God? And so they say, if you take a cup and you walk out to the sea and you scoop it up, and then you set it down in front of you, what color do you see? It's clear. If you try to grab a cup of the air and you set it down, what do you see? It's clear. What's the point? These things were to remind them of the sea that God had created, of the heavens, but most importantly, of the law that was given them and how good God was and his covenant with them. So many people, when they look at the world and all that God has created, they don't see the beauty. They don't see the firmament. They don't see the glory of God. They look in this cup and they see it clear. There are people, when they look at the creation of God, they don't see anything. And then there are others who are under the wings of the Lord, who see his beauty and his glory. And I think that's a great invitation for people who are not a Christian. So I'm done, and we want to invite you, if you're not a Christian, to come forward as we stand and sing our hymn.